My name's Steve Thomas, and I am reading from my novel manuscript, M and the Hanged Man. This scene happens about 2/3 of the way through the novel. Johnny hit the space bar, and the video on the center monitor of his computer terminal paused. He stood up suddenly, looked around, excited with revelation, desperate to share his discovery. There was no one else there. All of the 112 decorative lamps scattered throughout his basement were turned on. Something about lamplight against the black paint of the walls helped him think. He had inherited the eccentric disposition from Alan during the year he lived in the red bungalow under the man's tutelage. Johnny had moved beyond most of the lessons Alan taught him, but it seemed he would never kick the lamp habit. He found that he could no longer focus to the extent required to write solid code without precisely 112 lamps burning about him. Trash bags duct taped over the 4 windows blocked out the sun. Sunlight distracted him when he was trying to work. He experienced the sensation that he was viewing his basement for the first time. Besides the computer terminal and the 112 decorative lamps, the furnishings were rather Spartan. A mini fridge, a beanbag, a makeshift coffee table, 2 couches. Nothing hung on the walls. What did Jill think when she came down here and saw his craziness firsthand? Jill, the lamps, the black drywall. The thought made him cringe. What if none of this were real? What if he were wrong about M? Simple. If he were wrong, the world would have confirmation once and for all that Johnny Zhang was certifiably insane. He sold one lousy app for significantly more money than it was worth, couldn't handle the spotlight, and lost his mind. Look how he was living. If M wasn't real, wasn't what he thought it was, then he must be insane. It would be the only reasonable explanation for his behavior. He might have been down here alone in this basement for days. It was sometime in September 2011. Anything more specific than that was pure speculation. Every clock, including the computers, had been neutralized over a year ago. During one of his more paranoid phases, he convinced himself that knowing the time was distracting, that the best work happened irrespective of time. Johnny hated time. Years ago, before Johnny apprenticed under him, Alan built a Bluetooth-like device to hack into phones for mischievous recreational purposes. Johnny slightly altered Alan's designs, added a few of his own inventions. The updated iteration emitted a similar signal as before. However, the signal was no longer restricted to overriding cell phones, but now stifled the clock program on every electronic device inside a predefined radius. The technology was crude, almost stubborn, especially considering its inability to target specific devices. But it was innocuous. The signal didn't alter or infect other programs, only scrambled the clock's display, rendered the numbers on the screen illegible. Johnny thought his invention a clever one, mostly because it only affected devices with clocks, and then only affected the numbers on the screen used to display time. With respect to every other detail, the device functioned normally. Of course, a wind-up wristwatch would have been as unaffected by the signal as a sundial, but Johnny did not own one. The idea of something permanently attached to his wrist horrified him. Watches were much too constraining. If he were that desperate, he could walk up the stairs to the kitchen. His phone's battery died long ago, but his microwave had a clock, or he could remove the duct-taped trash bags from the windows. At the very least, discover whether it was day or night. And yet, what did the time matter? There was more work to be done, and, if necessary, more amphetamine to be had. In the mini-fridge near the stairs, he found a 16-ounce mason jar. Penciled over a masking tape label were the words apple, kale, ginger, beet, celery. Jill's telltale grade school print, each letter round and girly. A tiny circle instead of a stern dot hung in limbo over the eye. Every word seemed to contain the bubbly curves of a C or an O. as if those two enforced their will over the other 24 letters in the alphabet. Jill must have brought the juice over for him the same day she brought Sam. How many days had it been? 1? Maybe 3? Maybe more? It was impossible to tell. Perhaps he had not slept since then. He did not remember sleeping, but that proved nothing. Juice in hand, he walked over and regarded the 2 couches, thought, whether it has been 1 day or 5 years, it doesn't matter. This is where they had lain. On these couches is where it happened. And then he thought, yes, that's right. I am not insane. It happened. M is real. A large, muddy, clay-colored stain streaked across the tan, empty couch, stretched over 2 of the 3 bottom cushions. The stain might have been successfully removed had someone bothered to clean it up before it dried. Unfortunately, there had been too much going on during the moment to worry over such a trifle. But Johnny regretted not tending the stain immediately. Although the couch was bought from Goodwill for $35, it possessed sentimental value. He bought it his first year at Penn, received his first blowjob on it at the embarrassingly old age of 20, and then lost his virginity that same night with his back against the cushions, dominated by a 17-year-old freshman who, at the time, knew much more about those things than he had. Shipping it to LA from Philly after graduation cost 10 times more than the couch itself. But he'd grown attached, so in his mind, the expenses were justified. Now, however, due to sloppy negligence, laziness really, the couch was forever stained with Jill's thick blood. He could have cleaned it up any number of times between now and then, before the brightly oxygenated red soaked deep into the fabric and crusted to a brown. But he hadn't. It would need to be discarded with the rest of the trash, which was probably for the best anyway. Besides, unlike during college, money no longer presented itself as an issue. He could buy a much better couch without a second thought. After all, what's one couch with a little made-up sentimental value compared with M? A little blood was worth it, even to be expected. M exposes the sentimental as fake, declaims, no more false idols, out with the sentimental, and every other prefabricated value along with it. M gives the world truth, neither in the form of empty promise, like the words spoken by the soothsayers from the adolescence of civilization, nor cloaked behind the veil of metaphor and the sublime, but M gives the people truth directly. Isn't that what Sam Criss proved? When she was connected, did she not feel it shaking through her bones? Did she not know with certainty, despite never having studied its abstruse structure, its complexly illogical rationale? Did she not experience M's truth with the immediacy of vision, as though the knowledge always lived inside her, was merely waiting for the trigger or stimulus, an external key to unlock yet one more rediscovered, long-lost treasure of our race? I have provided the key, thought Johnny. I have given M to the world. And then the realization hit him sharply, like a slash down his forearm. Designing the product precluded him from experiencing its vision. It was a universal irony, which he had always vaguely known, but had just understood its full consequence for the first time right now. This kind of thing pervaded every aspect of the tech industry. For example, it was not very likely that a video game designer ever experienced the same mindless, button-mashing joy brought on by her creation in so many others. She might profess to still love playing video games, even her own, but she cannot lose herself the way the consumer can. She is always acutely aware of the television screen, of the designer's choices, of the quality of the graphics, of the inevitable glitches. She forever remains outside of the video game, watching from above, as though it were a model world in a snow globe. She can never again enter the moment-to-moment unitary embodiment that she experienced as a girl, that first drew her to video game design, that made so many of her loyal customers fiend for her next creation as the heroin addict fiends for the next fix. And yet, however ironic and sad it was that the video game designer cannot feast on the fruits of her own genius, M was no mere video game. The situations bore an analogous structure, but they were about as similar as a pond is to an ocean, a sandbox to the Sahara. Not being able to receive M's truth meant that he would not be able to take the next step with the rest of the world. By trailblazing the path forward for the rest of the human race, Johnny had necessarily condemned himself to obsolescence. He had long toyed with the concept that he was somehow chosen. Ever since he first read Alan's genealogy of the I'm in You operating system on the defunct blog The Lost Eurydice. He was only 13 at the time, still living in Hawaii, and even at that age, Johnny recognized Alan Caldwell's genius, saw the crux of the problem Alan posed when he dared the young engineers reading his posts to search for an answer that could realize I'm in You's potential. Johnny decided to rise to the dare, convinced he was fated for it. It only took a little more than a decade to succeed where Alan could not. But now, he realized he was not chosen, at least not in the way he thought he had been. If he were supposed to use M to lead the next revolution, to guide the way to the next echelon of existence, then shouldn't he be capable of experiencing its truth? I am not here to save anyone, he said. The empty room swallowed his voice. A faint electric buzzing emanated from the 112 lamps. I am no different than Alan. He sat down on the blood-stained cushions. The two couches were set up next to each other like an L. On the red couch lay Sam, sleeping. He leaned over, placed his palm on her forehead. It felt fine. She wasn't boiling like before. That must be a good sign. Probably meant that soon she would wake up. He said to her, "He did what he does who travels by night and carries a lamp behind him that does not help him, but makes those that follow him wise." That's a quote, Sam. I'll give you a present if you can tell me what it's from. She inhaled and exhaled pleasantly through her mouth. Her lips were slightly parted so that he saw the very tips of her teeth. Her eyelids closed. Her brain was probably functioning with more clarity and with greater speed than it had ever before. To look at someone dreaming the way Sam currently was, to know that so much was going on inside of her, it was all the proof Johnny needed that the body was an inelegant and, now, thanks to M, an unnecessary piece of equipment. She probably didn't want to wake up, he thought. But she would have to, at least for a little while. And then she could return to M forever. It's from Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 22, he said. I'm willing to bet anything that you've never read Dante. The quote is about Virgil, Dante's guide through hell, and one of his guides through purgatory. Virgil shows Dante the way to light, the road to heaven. But born before Jesus and never baptized, he must remain unsaved. Do you want to know something, Sam? She didn't respond. Me and Alan, we are like Virgil. Sam jerked a little in her sleep. She did that every now and then. Earlier, Jill theorized that the jerks had to do with Sam's epilepsy. After a moment, as always, they passed, and again she looked at ease. I thought Alan was my Virgil, but I was wrong. I'm Virgil too. Do you know what that means? I wonder if you've realized it by now. It means it's all you, Sam Chris. I suppose that's the beauty of it. The ignorant will rule, because inside of N, ignorance is truth. You're welcome. Johnny stood, drained the mason jar of juice, and returned the empty glass to the mini-fridge. Back in his chair, at the computer terminal, he opened an orange prescription pill container, crushed a 20-milligram pill of amphetamine salts between his molars. His index finger pressed the space bar. The video transcript of Sam's first voyage into M began to play on the center monitor. He estimated that this was his 200th viewing, but couldn't say with certainty. He could watch 200 more times without extracting all of its secrets, and most likely, he would have to. Next.